The first sound you remember is wind working the seams of the house, an old Alaskan harmony played through spruce, snow, and the soft clank of something metal swaying from a nail. Before sunrise, a stove door opens and the room flickers awake. By noon, a wrench rings against a stubborn bolt, and a patient voice mutters encouragement to a machine that has forgotten its purpose. That sound, the practiced coaxing of rust back into motion, has followed Otto Kilcher his entire life. On Alaska, the last frontier, he became the calm at the center of winter's argument, a cattleman-mechanic philosopher who treats broken things with mercy and who believes resourcefulness is a language anyone can learn if they're willing to listen. He's the kind of neighbor you call before you call anyone else. He is, by most accounts, the quiet heart of a homestead myth that turned out to be true. But legends pay in scars, and the same hands that lift a stuck starter out of a frozen truck also carry the weight of years, losses, and rumors you can't fix with a welder. If his work has ever moved you, leave a like as a small tribute before we start. At a certain age, the one where morning joints file their small complaints and winter feels a little longer than it did last year, a deeper darkness begins to gather around even the steadiest men. For Otto, it has taken the shape of persistent whispers that roll through fan forums, brief absences from episodes, and the uneasy familiarity of hospitals that, according to those close to the family, have become way stations on a road he never wanted to travel. What was once just a tougher day on the range can now become a week where the shop lights flicker on later than usual, and the list of "I'll get to that" grows longer than a coil of salvage wire in the corner. Viewers ask, carefully, "Is he okay?" Others answer with what they've heard, reportedly, "It's been said," by most accounts, the hedge words people use when they're trying to be kind while naming a fear. The truth lives somewhere between privacy and love. He's alive. He's still stubborn. He still reaches for the right tool, like a man who knows that, even in winter, the day will give if you give to it. But you can feel the stakes sharpen. What happens when the man who fixes everything begins to suspect he cannot fix time? The child who became that kind of man grew up inside rooms built to outlast storms. The house was simple, wooden shelves that bowed under canned goods, a row of lined boots near the door, a kitchen window that framed a tree line the color of a bruise just before the sun found it. Smells were the story: diesel, coffee, wood smoke, wet wool. The rhythm of the place was chores, school by boots and lantern, and the slow education of listening to engines, to weather, to parents who had come a long way from somewhere else and planted a life in soil you can't understand until you've knelt in it. That childhood, a boy learned patience the way others learn melody. If you watched closely, you could see it forming the shape of his future, the way he handled a stalled pump without panic, the way he traced a problem backward to its simple origin. His father, by all accounts a man of formidable will, believed Alaska taught better than any book, and that a day without work was a day winter won. His mother brought warmth in the most practical way: a hand on the shoulder, a loaf on the table, a word that turned a task into a lesson. Early on, Otto discovered that machines have temperament. They do not speak, but they confess to anyone who refuses to rush them. He showed a tenderness for the unglamorous fix: pins, cotter keys, gaskets rescued from coffee cans filled with mismatched hope. The family's world orbited salvaged metal the way some families orbit pianos. A junk pile wasn't junk. It was the library. He learned that mercy isn't just for people. Mercy is also stopping on the trail to tighten a loose chain so a sled doesn't fail later and strand someone in the kind of cold that doesn't negotiate. In that small crucible, resilience became a habit, not showy, unshakable. The early hustle looked like one long conversation with necessity. A teenager turned young man who could keep cattle moving, thaw a stubborn engine, and make a broken thing function at least long enough to get it home. Summers were a blur of hay and fence lines. Winters were apprenticeship under the stern tutelage of ice. The economy was barter and gratitude. If the neighbor's generator died, Otto brought a box of possibility and a grin that said, "We'll find it." If a belt was too short, he found a way. If a gasket didn't exist, he made one out of something humble that refused to be humbled. The invisible years, before cameras, before the quiet fame of being yourself in public, were where his legend learned to walk around. He wasn't chasing celebrity, he was chasing daylight. There were no auditions, only weather. No gatekeepers, only the stubborn door of a shed swollen with rain that he had to shoulder open every morning. Small breaks came in boring disguises. A tractor that limped back to life and gave the herd one more day of order. A neighbor who swore it couldn't be fixed, then watched as the thing coughed at the exact moment Otto asked it to. The homestead held. The family stretched and changed as families do. Friendships were built the way good welds are, clean surfaces, even heat, patience, and pressure. He became the man people called when they needed the impossible reduced to steps. Still, if you squinted, you could see a question forming at the edges. How long can a single person be the answer for so many problems? Even iron fatigues, even human beings who pretend they're iron. Then came the day when a camera crew stood in the yard. They smelled like the outside, plain air, new boots, careful curiosity. Someone had heard of a family, living on land that still asks you every season to prove you deserve to keep it, and of a man who turned scrap into salvation. It began quietly. A conversation, then a test. Follow us through a day and see if the day tells a story to anyone who wasn't born into this. Otto didn't change his clothes for them. He changed a belt on a motor and ignored how the lens breathed. The first time an audience watched him coax a stalled machine back into cooperation, something clicked. Not the machine, but the connection between a private ethic and a public hunger for authenticity. And that's when everything changed. The summit wasn't flashy. It was ordinary, made astonishing by attention. People tuned in, first out of curiosity, then out of affection. They admired the way he carried aggravation without turning it into anger. They found poetry in the way he inventoried bolts in his head and remembered exactly which coffee can held the one that would fit a part no one had replaced since the last president had brown hair. The show offered spectacle, storms, moose, the stubborn theater of Alaska, but its engine was tenderness. The tenderness of a man who treats the old cow with the same patient dignity he'd give a best friend. The tenderness of a husband whose laugh dissolves a problem before the problem remembers to be a problem. The tenderness of a father who teaches by doing, who hands a wrench to the next generation and trusts their grip before they trust it themselves. Culture latched onto the phrase everyone assigned him, the fixer. But it wasn't just mechanical. He fixed panic into plan. He fixed loneliness into neighborliness. He fixed we can't into we can if. Your memory of that era is warm light, a shop bathed in amber, fittings stacked like a skyline, words like tensioner and idler said as if they were names of old friends. Plains of ice reflecting a sky that seemed to love hard people. And then, deep under the soft triumphs, the costs began tallying themselves. A body is a ledger. The entries come due. Behind the peak, life collected its private bills. Some losses were quiet. A calf that didn't make it through a cold snap, even though the family tried everything. A storm that turned weeks of work into one long sigh and a pile of lumber. Equipment that refused to learn how to be young again and died awkwardly at the exact moment it was needed most. Some losses were larger. The ache of saying goodbye to elders whose voices built the house, the gravity of being the generation that must absorb both the future and the past. According to those who know the family well, there were seasons when accidents elsewhere in the clan drew attention away from the steady labor of the homestead and toward hospital corridors, updates offered in careful tones, and a sense that the frontier is not a museum, but a place where risk is real and sometimes ruthless. Viewers remember one relative's widely reported injury years ago, and the way the family gathered, each in their role, to remind the world that resilience isn't a slogan, it's a practice. In Otto's corner of the story, the weather changed in more intimate ways. The same habit that makes a person invaluable, answering every need, can also stretch a life thin. There were the long days that ended with hands that shook not from fear, but from fatigue. There were animals you tend as if you've borrowed them from time, knowing you will eventually return them. There were projects that asked more than a human has. There were, reportedly, health scares, the kind that send a ripple through a community, then dissipate into privacy and gratitude when the person you love walks back into the shop, slower but smiling. It's been said that some days he stared at a bolt and had to remind his fingers what they've always known. When cameras visit a homestead often enough, the homestead learns the new rhythm, and the man at the center must carry both the work and the watching. That, too, leaves a mark. But here's where it gets complicated. The show loved Otto for the qualities that make good television: humor that smiles from the side of the mouth, ingenuity that delights engineers, and the reliable friction of a problem and a solution. Fame, however gentle, is a kind of weather that never stops. It drifts through stores and gas stations. It revises errands into interactions. It asks for one more photo when your mind is tallying parts you need before the hardware store closes. It does not mean unkindness. Most fans come bearing gratitude. But for a person tuned to the quiet frequencies of machines, the continuous hum of being known can sometimes feel like a generator left running in the next room. Meanwhile, responsibility expands in both directions, to family and to audience. Philanthropy, helping neighbors, lending skills, participating in community, interacts with exhaustion. Good men rarely complain about being tired. They just keep doing the next right thing until the body asks them to reconsider. On the show, he often jokes about the stubbornness of old parts. Off-screen, the stubbornness of a good heart is both a blessing and a burden. Now, if you're wondering, what's true and what's myth, know this: reality television compresses time. A repair that consumed 4 hours and 3 cups of coffee might unfold on screen in 7 tidy minutes. That isn't deception, it's storytelling. The homestead is not a set. It's a living organism that predates cameras and will, by all indications, outlast them. As for money, you'll find a chorus of "reportedly" attached to any estimate of what a show like this pays. The family appears to maintain, by choice, a life that honors the ethic that built it: work, reuse, gratitude, and the unromantic calculus of seasons. On health rumors, the only facts that belong to an audience are the ones a person offers freely. Fans have seen hints, an episode skipped, a quieter presence, a post that says thank you in a tone that implies a harder month. But the official record is a man who continues to show up when he can, who appears to prioritize privacy, and who lets his life speak more loudly than any update ever could. He has always been more inclined to fix a leaking pipe than to narrate how he feels about it. Love threads through the story like paracord, tying everything to something that can carry the weight. His partner, environmentalist by inclination, caregiver by temperament, has reportedly been his great ally, an equal with her own skills who turned companionship into an operational advantage. Their home is a conversation between two different ways of seeing the same world: his hands, her eyes, his salvage, her stewardship. Together, they've shepherded children into adults who carry forward the ethic. Viewers know one son in particular as a reflection of his father, the way they share a grin when a plan works, the way the younger man's hands already know where to reach in his father's shop. Friends orbit as chosen family. The neighbor who shows up unasked, the crew member who learned to move his camera around the pace of work instead of demanding work, move around the pace of TV. And, because a life like this invites strangers into kinship, there are millions of fans who have never touched Alaskan snow, but who feel they've warmed their hands at Otto's stove. The present battle is not a single event, but a landscape. He wakes into a body that has earned every ache. Morning light pours across the bench where a project awaits, and he measures, sometimes aloud, sometimes in silence, what he can give today. The cattle still need order. The fences still talk in the wind. A generator coughs. He listens. Winter marks the calendar with a thicker pen than it used to. When snow falls, the flake is heavier than memory remembers. There are days when he moves with the speed of the weather, and others when weather moves without him, and he has to decide whether to surrender a task to the next generation. You can see it on the show when he stands back for a beat, letting a son or a friend crawl under the machine first. That's not retreat. That's leadership aging into legacy. According to those close to them, there have been weeks when doctors and rest changed the shape of plans. On screen, that translates to quieter arcs that center others and let Otto appear as a warm cameo rather than a heroic lead. Off-screen, it likely looks like what it looks like in every family facing time's unkind arithmetic. Medications lined like soldiers, warnings taped to the fridge, checklists, laughter that insists on itself anyway, a stubborn dance with limits. He does not announce it, he absorbs it. He chooses, whenever possible, to step into the shop and start the day at the vice, because the vice has never failed him. He has always believed that work is a prayer, and that the best way to honor fear is to give it a job. Still, you wonder, how does a man who has always carried the storm learn to set it down when the storm lives inside the bones? If you've watched from the beginning, you've noticed the long arc of inheritance. The first episodes introduced us to a homestead where elders still set the tone. More recent seasons show a relay in motion. This is not erasure. This is the correct conclusion of a promise the land extracted on day one. Everything on this ground must outlast any single human. Otto understands this at a level that hurts precisely because it's right. So he mentors in plain sight. He corrects gently. He celebrates a well-executed plan by others as if it were his own. When a younger hand gets a stubborn fitting to seat, he grins like a man who still remembers the first time a rusty bolt listened to him. When the cattle move through a gate without drama, he compliments the person who made the route make sense to them. He has nothing to prove except that love is better measured in what you teach others to do than in what you do alone. In the quiet hours, he counts the dead not out of morbidity, but out of reverence. The cows, whose names were jokes that turned tender after the second winter, the dogs who kept watch on the shop door, the parents whose voices still live in how he grinds coffee and how he ties rope around a load so it rides true. He has not been spared, but he has been accompanied. The difference is mercy. That's the quality that has always set him apart. Mercy as a working tool, not a sentiment. Mercy for the broken part that failed under pressure. Mercy for himself when a job requires 3 tries. Mercy for time, which is not the enemy, only the weather. If you've ever stood in a shop like his, you know the choreography. The reach for a particular socket without looking, the satisfied clack when it finds the nut, the first quarter turn that tells you the day will go your way. He still has those moments. They are fewer, maybe, and more precious. What the show can't quite capture, and this isn't the show's fault, it's the nature of cameras, is the conversation he has with himself before the day starts. It is the conversation every aging craftsman has. Will I be enough today? Will the things I love still recognize me if I move slower? Will the land accept me as I am now, not as I was then? There's no audience for that talk, except maybe the partner pouring coffee and the dog who knows when you need your hand in his fur. He answers the same way he has always answered difficult questions, by doing the next right thing until the question adjusts to reality. If there is a moment that feels like a hinge, it arrived not with a crash, but with a whisper. A simpler scene, a belt that wouldn't tension, a hand that trembled, a pause he had never allowed. He set the wrench down. He looked out the shop window at the line of trees he's memorized for decades. The pause lasted long enough to be noticed. Then he nodded once, to who can say, and called for help. Not because he couldn't do it, but because it was time to let someone else do it while he did something harder. Supervise. And that, too, is a kind of strength. It teaches the next generation humility and gives the audience a deeper story than triumph. It says, "We do not defeat time, we accompany it with grace." The moral courage to do that in front of millions is rarer than any moose crossing or shot of hoarfrost glowing on a calf's whiskers. So what, finally, is the heartbreak the title promised? It's not scandal. It's not some hidden cruelty finally revealed. It's the common tragedy of good men, the quiet realization that the body that carried a family and a culture cannot and should not carry it alone forever. It's the ache of unfinished lists, the ones that say, "Fix on Tuesday," next to items that now belong to a younger hand. It's the way fans, out of love, sometimes ask for proof of wellness that he doesn't owe anyone. It's the slow goodbye not to the homestead, not yet, maybe not for a long while, but to the delusion that immortality can be forged in a shop. Even miracles rust. Even saviors sit down. The heartbreak is also the beauty. He built something that will survive him. That was always the point. When you step back from the episodes, you see the architecture of a life whose generosity became communal property. You see neighbors who learned to trust their own ingenuity because he modeled it. You see a partner whose environmental ethic made the place not only sustainable but kind. You see children who are not confined by their parents' shadow but powered by it. You see fans who, reportedly, have written to say they grew gardens because of him, learned to weld because of him, chose to repair rather than discard because of him. Culture often celebrates spectacle. Otto celebrates maintenance, the holy task of keeping things going. Maintenance is what love looks like after the honeymoon. It's what heroism looks like when it stops posing. We have to say it plainly. There will be more rumors. There will be more absences that invite speculation. There will be, we hope, more mornings where he appears on screen with that half-smile that says he's already 3 steps into a plan and the rest of us are welcome to catch up. There may be, and reportedly have been, health days that tuck him into quieter corners. He will likely continue to offer as much as he can and to reserve the rest for those who have earned the right to know. He has always believed that privacy is not secrecy, it's stewardship. The measure of his life is not the information he shares, it's the mercy he practices. Near the end of a long day, the shop settles. Tools go home to their hooks. The floor keeps a record in sawdust and dark drops of oil. Outside, the cattle shift and breathe. He turns off the lights. The last sound is a door seal meeting its frame, another small victory against weather. In that gesture is the whole thesis: care, resilience, order in a world that delights in entropy. You can imagine him running a hand along the bench as he passes, the way you pat a shoulder you're grateful for. The night air meets him without malice. For a moment, there is no history, no fame, no worry, no ledger of pain. There is only a man walking across his own ground. He has always known how to carry weight. The trick now is to let the ground carry him back. The legacy isn't a brand, it's a practice anyone can inherit. Look at a problem with curiosity instead of rage, begin with what you have, and make it better. Teach what you know with patience. Laugh when it's hard. Apologize to the animals when weather makes you hurry them. Use what you saved. Save what you can. Repair more than you replace. If you sometimes talk to the machine, you're not odd. You're careful. Find partners who understand that mercy is a skill. Measure twice, cut once, and if you cut wrong, admit it and weld a fix. Live in a way that allows your children to say your name like a good luck charm rather than an obligation. Before we close, carry this with you. The show will edit, the fans will speculate, time will insist, winter will winter. But the essence remains a man who has outlived storms by refusing to decorate himself as the hero. He just works. He knows that myth without maintenance collapses. He has given us a rare gift by showing the threadbare side of heroism, the one held together with baling wire and grace. You can learn more from that than from any perfect victory. He has. If you're ready for a benediction, here it is. May Otto's days be long enough to do the work he still loves, and gentle enough to let him rest without apology. May the shop light always find him when he needs it, and leave him be when he doesn't. May the next generation honor him not by imitating his walk, but by walking further in the direction he pointed. May the land welcome him, as it has, for as long as he wishes to listen to it. And may those of us who have never felt Alaskan wind still learn to carry our storms with the same quiet courage. If you've got a favorite moment from Otto's journey, share it below, not as gossip, but as gratitude. And if this story made you feel the old mercy we keep trying to name, don't forget to leave a like as a gesture of tribute.